Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. How do Model United Nations programs around the world help young people better understand issues confronting the United Nations, such as war and peace, economic and social development, and human rights? We'll be back in just a moment to talk about these and other important issues. Welcome back to our program. Global Connections Television is an independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guests. Today we have a very interesting program dealing with the Model United Nations concept in general and one particular Model United Nations program in particular. My guest today is an expert on both of these issues. My guest today is Mr. Ben Reno-Weber. Mr. Ben Reno-Weber worked for the World Bank in Washington, D.C., and in the Balkans, where he focused on microfinance and international development. He graduated from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government and the Harvard Business School before joining the Boston Consulting Group. In 2010, he joined the Kentucky YMCA as CEO. Ben Reno-Weber, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Glad to be here.
I appreciate you being with me. Ben, we're going to get into your program, in particular, some microcosm of literally thousands of Model United Nations programs around the world. But just generally speaking, what is the Model UN concept, just from the macro standpoint?
Sure. So the idea is that you bring young people together, and before the young people come to form a United Nations, they have researched a country. And Model United Nations gives students an opportunity to research, to explore, to put themselves in the shoes of someone from another country, and then come and represent that country to the other students that are participating.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've got a video clip narrated by Alec Baldwin talking about this Model United Nations concept, and we're going to watch that, listen to it, and we will come back and talk about it. Let's go to the video.
Great.
We are in caucus, and this is completely outrageous.
You have no proof
to hand
for the
over.
demanded
There's
arrest
no
of
way
civilians.
they can avoid your airstrike.
And if I may,
and they have been met with resistance.
Before military action is taken, we can meet.
A new century, a new millennium, hopefully a new age of peace. The United Nations was born in response to the horrors of 2 global wars and countless international conflicts. Since the end of World War II, the United Nations has worked to foster dialogue among people of all nations. From the beginning, the United Nations has recognized that educating the next generation is vital to ensure lasting peace. Except for a brief hiatus during World War II, a form of the Model United Nations has been in continuous operation since the 1920s. Begun in 1923 as the Model League of Nations, the program was initially intended for university-level students. By the 1950s, the approach was recognized as an effective tool for high school students as well. Last year, over 200,000 people, from 6th graders to graduate students, participated in Model United Nations classes or clubs in over 32 countries worldwide. In high school and college classrooms and at conferences around the world, Model United Nations students are debating the same issues, learning the same tactics, and struggling for solutions together. just as in the real United Nations.
The resolutions that we make, if they would go on a world scale, they would work.
What we're doing in the Model United Nations is very close to what they're doing in the real United Nations.
You know, it's almost like playing sports. You know, you see, when you understand the game, you see how it all runs together.
Model UN offers an authentic simulation of the General Assembly, Security Council, and other UN sessions, letting students step into the shoes of ambassadors. To prepare for their role, students adopt an assigned country, learn all they can about it, and use all of their knowledge and talents to lobby for that nation's best interests. Model UN works virtually all of a student's mental muscles: history, geography, writing, public speaking, social skills, psychology, teamwork. Every one of these is essential in conflict resolution. Some students get involved in Model UN because they already have a strong interest in international relations.
Ben, I think that gives us a really good overview of the Model United Nations concept. Let's focus on your program in particular. You head up the Kentucky YMCA. You have a program called, well, first off, you have two basic programs.
Sure.
What's the first one, then we'll talk about KUNA.
Sure. So we run a model state government, which is called the Kentucky Youth Assembly, and that brings students together for 3 days to be legislators. They deal with issues specific to Kentucky, but it's a very similar concept to the other program that we run, which is KUNA, the Kentucky United Nations Assembly. And for KUNA, schools come, they pick a country or set of countries, and for 3 days, they act as ambassadors from that country to the United Nations.
Now, there are literally thousands, I think over 250, 300,000 Model UNers around the world. In the United States, excuse me, there are about 200,000 at least, but we could have talked about Model UN programs in Copenhagen, Singapore, possibly La Paz, Bolivia, wherever, because they are all over the world, and they are so very interesting. When was your program started, and why was it started?
So our program was started in the 1970s, and it was started as a companion to the domestic program that was focused on Kentucky. And the idea was that as the world grew closer and international affairs came to have more of an impact on the daily life of young people and just all people in Kentucky, we needed a way to introduce people to the concepts and the issues that mattered to people around the world. So the Model United Nations concept was born within Kentucky. Now it has grown considerably. This last year, we had more than 200 schools participate, representing more than 120 countries. And we had schools from around Kentucky. So it's really a real cross-section both of the state and then of the world coming together.
And it's very interesting. You have, I think, 3,500 students from middle school and high school in a state that has 4.2 million people, which is a relatively small population in a mid-sized to a small state, which is really remarkable when you think of states like California with 35 million people, or New York or Texas or whatever. So it's really quite a tribute, I think, to your program that so many young people want to be involved. How do they select the countries? How do you pick the countries you want to, or a country you'd like to work with?
Sure. So the way that we do it now, it's the schools select a number of countries based on the number of students that they're bringing. So they have to bring at least a minimum of 6 students to represent that country effectively. And they have a maximum of 15 students, because we want schools to really pick a variety of countries. And larger schools often pick a theme. So they might pick a region that they're going to represent several countries in that region. Or last year we had a school that picked all countries who had a Cinderella myth. And so they represented
a Cinderella myth.
Cinderella, very
Okay.
similar to the Cinderella story. So
Sure.
they picked all countries that had that within their cultural context. And then they represented each of those countries. And by represented, the way that our program is structured, the first night of the program is a cultural night. So every school does a cultural display. They wear the native attire of at least one aspect of a country's culture. And it's their job to represent that country to the rest of the students who are there. Recognizing that for most of our students, they're never going to get the chance to interact with someone from Ghana, from Norway. But this gives them at least some approximation of, oh, okay, these are the issues that are important to those people. This is what daily life is like in a simplified fashion, but at least giving them some sense of, oh, okay, I understand a little bit more about what it would be like to walk in this person's shoes.
And of course, one of the other concepts that you have is to help people understand the United Nations and the thorny issues it's dealing with. And of course, in this process, you elect a Secretary General, you have select a Security Council, 15 members of the Security Council, you have a President of the General Assembly. What are you looking for in leadership qualities of the people who seek out those positions, who want to fill those slots?
Well, our organization in general is committed to the idea of servant leadership. It's the idea that for a leader to be effective, they need to be connected with the people who they intend to lead. And really a leader's job is to focus on the agenda of their constituents in a very interactive and dynamic way. So those are the things that we focus on as an entire program, not just at the Model UN. So every candidate for office within our program has to organize a service project out in the real world in order to be eligible to run for office. And then they spend the next year, once they have been elected, at the high school level, the Secretary General serves on our board of directors and also is responsible for helping their school and community focus on issues that both are local and international. So we encourage every student in our programs to participate in a service project that is domestically focused and then a service project that is in some way internationally focused.
Now, a lot of the students in the past, the ones with whom I've spoken in Kentucky and elsewhere, have enjoyed the program immensely. In fact, I've never heard a person who went through the program 5 years ago or 40 years ago complain about the program in any of the states or countries where I've encountered them. But a lot of them deal with peace and security issues. That seems like it's the number one topic that comes up. But there are other important topics that are affecting people around the world. Let's focus on one in particular, and that is climate change. This, many observers believe this is the number one problem because all 7.3 billion people are afflicted by climate change. We lose the climate, we've lost the ball game. It's going to be a very difficult situation. But do you bring in other topics such as climate change? And if for example, we've seen it's affecting every country, but one area in particular that's been hit very hard has been Ethiopia. The Rift Valley area in Africa has seen the droughts. They've always had droughts, but the level of droughts have increased, and the frequency of droughts has certainly increased over the years. Do you bring in items such as climate change to help the students broaden their perspective and not just deal with peace and security issues, but talk about issues of global warming and others?
Well, you know, the really fun thing about our program is that it is driven by the students. And so the students select the issues that are important to them. What we ask is that they authentically represent the views of the countries that they are bringing to the program, not just their own personal views. So if you take an issue like climate change, regardless of your personal feelings about climate change, what we ask of you as a student is that you represent the views of Bangladesh, if that is the country you're representing. And so every year, the issues that are important to the countries that are at our program change. And it really is a reflection of what's going on in their host countries. So Ethiopia is a perfect example. Ethiopia has come, and each school group that represents them might focus on a different issue. They might focus on water security one year. The next year it might be physical security in their border conflict with Eritrea. It might be, broader political issues affecting Africa as a whole. I mean, it really is driven by the students and their passions. It's our goal that every student who comes to our programs finds something that inspires them. Our philosophy as an organization is that to be an effective citizen, a student needs to be inspired, they need to be informed, they need to have skills like critical thinking, listening, empathy, public speaking, and then they need to have enough experience of their own capacity to be effective, to have the confidence to say, okay, yeah, I can do something about this.
Now, the Model UN concept, the Model United Nations concept, is a very unique concept. It's one that's been in place since, I think, 1923, along in that period, because it helps to educate, inspire, and train future leaders. How important is it for these young people? They go through the program, they enjoy it, they learn about issues, they stand in someone else's shoes. They're not just from the United States or from England or from Argentina, wherever. They take on the role of the host country that they're emulating or participating in their discussions. How is it possible to help these people to continue to have that international interest, to learn more about these international issues, and not just go through this one experience, but to continue it into their future lives, because they are the future leaders. They're the ones who are going to help us achieve or be successful or not be successful in the future. But how can we help them to engender this interest in learning more about the United Nations and also international issues that impact their lives, and also what they do can impact people's lives in other parts of the world?
Sure. Well, I think there's two ways that we really primarily address that. The first is, and I can speak to my personal story, I came through our program when I was in middle school. We were required in 6th grade to participate in this program. So I still remember we were Ecuador, my first conference. I wore a poncho. I learned a little bit about the indigenous population of Ecuador. And of course, in my first conference, I didn't say a word. But I was hooked on the idea, there are all these broader things going on that I don't maybe see in my daily life, but that are impacting the way that I shop, where my food comes from, how goods are produced around me. And then also what we do has an impact on all of these people around the world that maybe we don't see. So for me, doing this program through middle school and high school then sparked a passion for international affairs that led me to study that, to study abroad, to learn languages, to say, this is maybe something that I want to do with my career. And that's what actually led me to go to school in DC and then to work for the World Bank, to spend some time living in the Balkans. It was really that first spark of being here and seeing that. So I think that's one thing that can happen, but that really only is going to happen to a very small percentage of the people who participate. Much more often, and really the goal of the program is to have people understand a little bit better all the forces that are at play in their lives, and to feel like it's not totally mysterious. When oil prices rise, we want people to say, right, that's because of this thing that is happening in Iran or Venezuela. Okay, I understand. Well, what are some of the aspirations of those people? What are some of the things that are going on with their governments? And how do my choices and my life impact that? So a lot of what we do is try and say, okay, here's the experience of the Model UN. Now let's think about what we can do in our daily lives to impact the global situation. And what is wonderful about the world now is that it's so interconnected. Students can have a direct connection with someone from another country in a much easier way than they could when I was going through the program. And they can see the impact, when we partner with the International Book Project in Lexington, which ships leftover books and textbooks to schools all over the world to help those students learn English. I mean, that's something that a student can immediately tangibly put their hands on. Or we're partnering this year with a group called WaterStep. It's an international group out of Louisville that focuses on providing clean water through this amazing pump technology that they've developed in partnership with GE. And the part of how they finance their operations is by collecting shoes. So we've got all across the state school groups doing shoe drives. They donate those shoes to WaterStep. WaterStep sells them. And then those students have contributed to providing clean water to an orphanage in Panama. I mean, that's a really direct connection that is outside of the Model UN program, but that we hope the Model UN program hooks them into seeing how they can be effective.
And it's interesting, too, that what sparked your interest in international civil service to a large degree, working with the World Bank and doing other things and being involved with the local program, was your participation as a Model UN student, and you were part of the delegation representing Ecuador.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. Is there any way to follow up with these students over the years? I know you have 3,500 to come through your program. There are hundreds of thousands in the United States and around the world going through them. But is there a way to follow up with them other than just sort of anecdotally, say 5-10 years from now they come back and say, well, I went to work for the United Nations, the World Bank, or for the State Department, or whatever the case, from a foreign ministry or whatever. But is there some way to do a longitudinal tracking or just to stay in touch with them?
It's not something that we have done to this point, although it is something that we are very much interested in doing. And in fact, if I could make a plug, if there are former participants of our program, we are trying to find you. So if you could go to our website, www.kymca.org, we have an alumni tab where we're trying to find the people who did this program. And really, our organization was founded in 1890, though we have not done the Model UN for that long, obviously, since there was not a UN. And our 125th anniversary is coming up in 2015. And so one of the things that we are doing is reaching out to our participants and trying to get stories. Oh, right, I remember being China, and then when I was able to go to China as an adult, all of those things that I had learned came back into play for me. Tracing what impact this program has in a longitudinal way is very difficult. But anecdotally, I'll tell you one story. We ran a program recently where we brought together high school students from all sorts of different socioeconomic groups in Louisville. And we were doing advocacy training. And one of the participants was from Myanmar, from Burma. And she was very quiet, wasn't really part of the group. Was kind of off to the side, and one of the students who had been through our Model UN program went up to her and said, hello, my name is, where are you from? And she said, I'm from Burma. Well, it happened that this girl who had been in our program had represented Burma, now called Myanmar, at our Model UN the year before, and she said, oh, Myanmar, what part of Myanmar are you from? And the girl's whole affect changed, because she said, wait, you know my country? She says, I did this Model UN program. She said, no one here knows my country. And that you could just see that they were able to make this connection, and that girl just puffed up. And she said, well, I'm from the mountains, and it was really a moment of connection that those two young women were able to have that changed the dynamic. Because all of a sudden, someone in American culture was meeting them part way and made them feel like they were part of something. And that's really what we are hoping to spark in our students.
Mm-hmm. And that is so important to do that. And of course, we were talking about numbers. We were talking about 150,000 or so Model UNers in the United States, maybe another 150,000 around the world. That's just for 1 year.
Right,
exactly.
Right. No, and
when you're putting out this appeal, this show goes worldwide. So we literally have millions of people out there watching who have participated in the Model United Nations program, so they might want to get in touch with
love to hear
your folks in Kentucky, but also people in other parts of the world get back in touch with the coordinators of their program and see how they can share their stories, see perhaps how they can be involved in helping to train and to work with this new generation of leaders coming online, because they have a lot of experience in this area and a lot of lifetime experience after leaving the program.
Oh, and we would love to find people who are willing to serve as mentors, as resources, who would be able to say to a student, hey, I was in the Peace Corps in this country, and I would be happy to talk to you about my experiences with that.
Exactly. Well, in our last minute or so, what do you think are some of the major challenges confronting or looming on the horizon for your Model UN program, but others around the world too?
I think one of the most difficult pieces facing any internationally focused program is the skepticism about the international community that we have, I think particularly in Kentucky, but I think all over the country. And I think really one of the key things for everyone to understand is we can't make the world go away. So our choosing not to participate in something like this only handicaps students. Even if you go in and you believe the United Nations is a terrible, evil organization bent on world conquest, which I don't, by the way, understanding how it works, understanding the cultures of the countries that participate can only help to serve students in their lives, even if it is just to help them understand their own culture. That is, I think, one of the really major obstacles. And then the other piece is that these programs cost money. And helping to find the resources to enable students, particularly from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, to participate is always a challenge.
Exactly. And of course, we would encourage everyone to participate in the various Model UN programs around the world, and also to find out more about the United Nations and international issues. And one way to do it is go to unfoundation.org, sign up for an electronic newsletter that will come to your mailbox every day. And we all need more information on these issues. But Ben Reno-Weber, I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us on today's Global Connections program.